Here's David Levy.
Well, good evening, Boca Raton, South Florida, and those of you that are watching us streaming live from around the world. This is David Levy. I'm a gerontologist and a family caregiver expert, and this is our half hour to discuss issues that you may have concerning family caregiving. My topic tonight is, should family caregivers of spouses with advanced dementia, that means Alzheimer's, feel guilty about having a social or a sexual relationship with another person? Now, let me explain what I mean. Just because one spouse has a senior moment is not permission for the other spouse to go have a relationship. I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is what happens after a loved one has gotten so far along in the progress of dementia that they can no longer be a part of the family, be a part of the interaction between a husband and a wife, to share things, to be able to be part of the dialogue that a couple have on a whole variety of levels. And it's a question that constantly arises in my support group. So there's a whole plethora of issues that surround this. Some are religious, some are cultural, and some are very practical. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Our number here is 888-565-1470. And any of you that don't have an AM radio and aren't hearing us, all I can tell you is if you can get to a computer, we're on CareGiverReality.com. Go to the site, push live, and you should be able to see us streaming onto your computer and into your home. All right. This is a subject that has drawn a lot of controversy, but yet has brought a lot of people out who one would not have expected would have had a comment. Many religious leaders are beginning to change their approach, not so much to monogamy, but because everybody has their feelings about that and the sanctity of marriage, and we're not questioning that. What we are talking about is, what do you do when a loved one can no longer fulfill their needs? I'm not just talking sexual, but leave a big hole in our lives because they can't interact with us. So when a spouse of a dementia patient continues to care for and engage with their spouse, is it possible for them to have a parallel relationship, all right, with another person to provide the activity and interaction that spouse no longer can have with their loved one? And further, this concept is called emotional divorce. And it has a lot of back and forth that people are trying to fit into the new dialogue of family caregiving. What do you do when your spouse is still alive but is no longer with you? I'm not talking about just in a nursing home. I'm talking about emotionally and practically. The advancement of dementia has just made it impossible for them to be able to successfully engage with you as a caregiver and to engage in any of the other things that allow us to have an effective relationship. That number is 888-565-1470, or you can go ahead and try and blog us or text us using CareGiverReality.com, and we'll be happy to take your call. I don't know if we had a call that came in. I heard the phone ring, but so far I don't have the screen facing me. So right now, I don't. And I was just listening to the show that preceded us. It's a tough act to follow, but it looks like we have a phone call from David. And so, David, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yeah, hi, David. Good evening. I've listened to you in the past, and as a caregiver, it's a very, very tedious and difficult chore. And over the course of about 8 years, finally reached a point where I had to place my spouse in a facility where she's been now for the last 6 months.
Not an easy decision to make, was it?
Oh, it was terrible. It was a horrible decision.
Was it a horrible decision, or was it just a tough decision, but was the outcome one that right now you have others that are helping to care for her that might be doing a better job than you could do on your own alone?
Yeah, I think I reached a point where I just couldn't handle it anymore in terms of cleanliness and showers, in terms of dressing and undressing, in terms of toileting and so on. So I reached a point where I just had to either get help in the house, which I did for a while,
right,
or place her into a facility, which finally came to pass simply because the woman that was working with me left for more pay and what she thought was a better job. She subsequently left that job and wanted to come back, but I felt that it was just too iffy. She might leave again.
Okay. And that's not unusual when it comes to you hired her privately. She didn't come through an agency, did she?
I hired her privately. That's correct.
All right. Well, that's always a risk that we take in not knowing who we're bringing into our homes. And even though they seem like wonderful people, at times they have their own agenda, and it's tough to find a quick replacement.
Yeah, she was truly outstanding. I had no problem at all with her work and her timeliness, her ethics. They were just parallel in my thinking and the way I live my life. The problem, though, that you're addressing is one of a relationship with a third party, and that's something which I ended up entering into, and it was absolutely by chance. It wasn't something that I was seeking. I was introduced to this individual, to this woman, and when I first met her and began to talk with her, my concept of this whole relationship was simply one of going out to dinner or lunch or going to a movie, and that's where it would begin, that's where it would end.
All right. In other words, you were basically looking for somebody to socialize with.
That was it.
Okay.
And that was extremely, it was very difficult for me to enter into even that kind of a relationship simply because it was not my way of doing things for the last 50-plus years.
Right.
And
was it a religious issue? Was it a moral issue? Or did you just feel that you had guilt because you were doing something that in your heart of hearts you weren't sure you were supposed to?
It's a combination of all three.
Okay.
The religious part of it was one of the considerations, but the moral issue was certainly another factor. And internally, I had to try to grasp the concept and come to grips with it. It was not something I did routinely. Subsequently, by the way, the relationship evolved into and has evolved into something more than just simply going out for dinner and to a movie.
All right. And how does this other person feel about fitting into this relationship?
Well, oddly enough, I was very not oddly, but I was very upfront, and she was quite aware of the fact that I was married and the fact that I had my wife in a facility.
Mm-hmm.
I was very specific in trying to make certain that she knew, so that this wasn't a clandestine kind of a meeting, and that she either had to understand it and agree with it, or subsequently it would never work. I want to just take it another step, though. As time evolved, we both went to visit my wife.
Oh, you actually went to the facility with this other person to visit your wife?
Yes.
All right.
And she happens to be a very compassionate woman, very understanding, and I go there probably 4 to 5 times a week, and I would say that she visits with me at least once, sometimes twice a week as well.
Mm-hmm.
And each and every time we go in there, we embrace my wife, and I do kiss her on the cheek and try to hold her and comfort her. She, frankly, I don't think understands who I am, or she certainly doesn't understand who this other individual is.
Right.
So it made it a little bit easier, although it's still a very difficult situation to be in.
I'm sure. And when you talk with this other person, how does she feel about engaging with your wife, even though your wife, I assume from what you're telling me, that she has some form of dementia, and therefore cognitively can no longer, kind of deal with the world around her, or be really aware of what's happening. But how does this other person, I don't want to call her a significant other yet, but how did she feel about engaging with your wife?
I think initially she was apprehensive, but she too has grown to understand that my wife plays an important part of my past life, and that I will never abandon her, and I believe that she understands that and has never spoken negatively about the relationship I do have with my wife.
Right. She's never said to you, it's time for you to give up your wife and come be with me.
No, and I think if that ever came to pass, I think that would throw it would be a major roadblock in terms of the relationship, because I am committed. But by the same token, this woman is also compassionate about that. She does not, we've discussed it, and she does not ever expect me to walk away from my wife.
All right. Well, then it sounds like you found some good mutual ground to develop this relationship. Yeah. It arose out of a need on your part. And let me ask you this. Did this person have a spouse who also had dementia?
No.
Okay.
She's widowed.
Okay.
I also think you ought to know that my wife and I have been married over 50 years, so I mean I'm not that young. And this other woman is the same age as my wife, so it's not like I'm looking for some person who is. It wasn't geared to looking for some kind of a sex kind of thing. It was just
right. Well, it sounds like, if I could just go back and pick up on something you said when you began with, you were either introduced or serendipitously the two of you met. So it didn't sound like you were even looking for somebody, but this person just happened to find a place in your life, and in the beginning it fit a social need, and you pursued it from that ability.
I did, and the truth of the matter is that when we do go over to visit my wife, she embraces her, she walks with her hand in hand, as do I. Oh. And I feel very good about that. I also wanted to mention something else, that I have 2 children, and I made a very specific point in the onset that they would be aware of the fact that I was seeing another woman. And
as children, and the only reason I have to just kind of quicken up this conversation, I don't know if you can hold over the break, but we've got to take one. That's part of the requirements of doing the show. But how did your children react when you said, I am socializing with another individual now that Mom is beyond us still having the kind of relationship that we once had, and she's in an institution? What was their response?
Well, both of them responded somewhat differently. One of them was very encouraging, and he said that's the best thing I've heard, because he was quite aware of the fact that my wife had dementia and that I could no longer deal with it. The other one was a little bit more reserved. He didn't discourage it, but he said his comment was just go slow.
Okay. Well, if you could hold on a minute, caller, and I see your name is David, similar to mine. We've got to take a break, and we're going to go to that break right now. If you can hold, we'll be right back with you.
Okay.
Hello. Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for themselves? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you stressed, burned out, frustrated, and don't know where to turn? Have you realized that your doctor, lawyer, and mental health professionals don't have real practical answers? You need a non-clinical family caregiver expert that the professionals turn to. You need David Levy. He is a family caregiver expert with 25 years of active experience with thousands of family caregivers. He can help you provide a better quality of life for you and your loved one. Contact David Levy at dlevy@caregivered.org. That's dlevy@caregivered.org. Or call 561-482-0086. And let's get your mental road to healing started.
And we're back, and that number is 888-565-1470. You're listening to David Levy. I am your resident gerontologist and family caregiver expert. We have another David online, and we have been discussing the concept of dating or having a social relationship, or possibly even beyond that, since we're all adults, when you no longer have a loved one because of dementia that you can have an effective relationship with. David, I'm going to have to thank you very much for your participation tonight. We've got another caller, and I would like to be able to take that call, but this is a subject we're going to be discussing in the future because it has a lot of ramifications for a lot of people, and I hope that we'll have an opportunity to hear back from you in the near future. I want to thank you for calling in, and let's go to our next caller. It's Jack in Delray. Jack, you're on the air.
Hi, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Jack. And how are you this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's an interesting subject that you are discussing tonight. It was something I dealt with a while back, not too long ago.
Right. Is your wife in a facility?
Just briefly. I took care of her as a caregiver at home for most of the duration of the illness.
Okay.
Only the last, perhaps, 2.5 months where she was put in a nursing home.
Okay. Well, that makes you a dyed-in-the-wool family caregiver, and you get the gold star for having done that, irrespective of what the circumstances were. Anybody that can keep their loved one home up until the end has my deepest respect, because I've been doing this for 25 years and I know just how difficult it is. Anyway, to go back to the subject for the moment, we were talking about having a relationship with somebody either while your loved one is too sick, or in the case of dementia, not capable of interacting with you and fulfilling not just, as I said, we're not trying to couch this in terms of sex, but we're trying to couch this in terms of that hole in the relationship when you can't share, when you can't do things together, when you don't even have somebody that you go out and have a pizza with and talk about the things that were happening during the day. What kind of an experience did you go through, and how did you wind up creating a relationship with that other person?
Well, those are exactly the issues that I had to deal with over a long period of time, and it isn't something that happened quickly. It happened very gradually over a long period of time, which makes it you're dealing with situations that if you had to deal with them all at one time, you'd throw up your hands and say it's impossible. But slowly, but over a period of time, you acclimate yourself to the loss of companionship, the loss of socialization. Your life changes imperceptibly over a long period of time, so you're really not aware of that on a day-to-day basis on what you're really losing.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're watching the beach, you can't see the grains of sand that slowly get washed away. But if you come back in 6 months after the storm, you can definitely see that the beach is gone. So the imperceptible building up or loss of that relationship, I'm sure one day you kind of didn't, not a question of waking up, but one day you realized that all of those things that you had in common with your wife had slowly disappeared. Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely. And at the time...
How did you feel about that when you realized that that was now, I won't call it your fate in life, but that now that you have realized that your spouse of so many years no longer was the person that you knew and could engage with? What was your response?
Well, again, it was a gradual response. I think the normal, well, I shouldn't say the normal, perhaps the usual response with many people is initially there's frustration, probably morphs into anger, a feeling of helplessness, and finally, for me anyway, it came over a period of time, it evolved into coming to terms with the situation. And and I guess it comes down to either you have to accept it fully, or you have to run. You can't do both. And
well, that's you can run, but you can't hide.
In my case, it wasn't an option, and there was no place to run, and I just accepted fully that this is what I was going to be doing, and I wasn't looking too far down the pike. In other words, I was just this was my job in life was going to be from here on in, and I fully accepted it, and it made my days so much easier to deal with.
Okay, let me ask you this question, if I can, Jack, and I because I find this to be a fascinating subject, and I appreciate your candor in coming on and discussing it. But you have children?
Yes, I have.
And what was their response when they recognized that you were engaging socially with another individual because mom could no longer, be there for you? What was their response?
The response, well, one of them was fully supportive and was happy that my life had taken a turn for the better. One of them was sort of accepting and non-judgmental, and I think one of them had a little difficulty dealing with it.
Mm-hmm. And
none of them, I think, gave me a lot of heartache, anger, or made problems for me.
Well, that's good, because that's an issue with a lot of caregivers who are faced with a situation similar to yours. Many times the children feel that, just similar to when you've lost somebody, and they get into the issues of mom has passed away, dad's dating too soon, or he's out there looking, and how can that be? There has to be some imaginary period of time that takes place before you're allowed to resume your life, shall we say. Did you feel that you were put under those kind of restraints?
No, not really. Not really, because in a sense it was almost like living a double life. And the other thing is, and I think why my kids were probably more accepting, is that it wasn't anything planned. I didn't go on J-Date. Or J-Date or something. It happened quite in the normal course of events. It was sort of a happenstance. My children were aware of it, and it was just something that like you bump into someone and you have a lunch or you go out with somebody and it sort of
evolves from there.
Developed over a period of time from there.
Yeah.
So
well, our previous caller, David, I don't know if you were listening to him, he had the same experience. He wasn't out looking. A matter of fact, he was going through the agony of coming to grips with placing his wife in a facility, and somebody happened to have come into his life. We really didn't get into the why and the wherefore. And similar to yourself, the relationship just evolved. He wasn't out there looking, but somebody came along and filled the void that seemed to be a deep necessity, and it seems like you probably, I'm presuming, but you probably had a good relationship with your wife and missed all of the things that a good spouse represents. Jack, you still there?
Yeah, no, I'm here. No, that's exactly right.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I must tell you, this has been a fascinating conversation. We only have 2 minutes left, and I've got to cover a couple of things. I want to thank you very much for calling. This is a subject we're going to be discussing in the future, and I hope we'll have the opportunity to hear from you again. You were very enlightening, and you added a lot to this evening, and I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for the opportunity.
Hopefully we'll hear from you again in the future. Remember, any of you out there, that number is 888-565-1470, and we're going to be discussing subjects like this every Monday from 6:30 to 7 on the Caregiver Reality Show, and there are no holds barred. You can bring up any subject on any aspect of caregiving, because this is a subject that affects millions and millions of people. I happen to have been looking at some statistics the other day because I do a lot of writing, and I'm writing a book right now called The Group, which is about a support group. I've been doing them for 25 years, and I've homogenized a lot of the stories into the chapters of this to-be book. I've only got a minute left, but I wanted to let you know that it's not just a problem here in America. The World Health Organization came out the other day and gave us a statistic that somebody is diagnosed with dementia every 4 seconds. Now, that's worldwide, and you might say, well, gee, that's not such a big number. But when you stop to think that probably more than half the world doesn't even have the medical or psychiatric capability to be able to have that kind of a diagnosis made for them, or even realize that they are suffering from a dementing illness, that really drives it back to the Western countries and the United States. And just as we're seeing 10,000 boomers every day turn 65, we know that 1 out of every 6 is going to have dementia and going to have Alzheimer's. So we're here to answer your questions, deal with your issues, and you can rely on us to be able to set it straight. That number is 888-565-1470, or check us out on the website where you'll see pictures of and digital film of our support groups, CareGiverReality.com. I want to thank you, South Florida and the world, for listening.
You have been listening and watching David Levy, gerontologist and non-clinical family caregiving expert. Visit our website at CareGiverReality.com and hear and see unscripted family caregiver support groups discussing all of the questions that you have wanted to ask but didn't know where to turn. Tune in again next time for more updates and special guests who bring their caregiving experience to you so that you can deal with your problems